So I went back and forth deciding, should I do a couple of weeks on the themes and major motifs and ideas in Hosea, or should we jump in, read the passages, and kind of deduct the themes out of what we're reading and going through? So I ultimately landed on actually doing a couple of weeks of these themes and ideas by themselves, and then we'll get into reading it, because I just think, one, the prophets are very foreign to most modern Christians for reasons that we've discussed, and that giving you the information first and then reading it, and you might be able to pick it up a little bit better. It's kind of how I did it with students all those years. Let me tell you what we're going to read, then we'll read it, and I'll tell you why it says that, and then we'll talk about what it says. But also because Hosea in particular, I may not do this for every minor prophet. We may jump into it because their themes or something are a little less foreign. But Hosea in particular, like we talked about last week, is unique among the prophets, not just because he writes in a northern dialect, being the only prophet from the north, but also because he encapsulates a lot of the same pictures differently. And that giving at least Hosea to you up front and talking about his themes and how he pictures things differently will be helpful when we ultimately just dive into, especially chapters 1 through 3, but deal with the three major sections that you can see up here: 1 through 3, 4 through 11, and then 12 through 14 in big chunks. But so as we dive into this, here we go. So Hosea uses kinship language, where most of the other prophets are going to talk about you've broken the covenant. Now, what Hosea means by this is you've broken the covenant, but he's going to picture it much, much more differently than, say, Isaiah, who's going to start off in Isaiah 1. He starts off with the legal codes of saying, listen, I'm going to bring the legal charge here. In Deuteronomy, heaven and earth are witnesses of the covenant. So let me call heaven and earth. Let's summon the court here and actually hash this out, because you guys have broken the covenant. Hosea is going to mean the exact same things, you've broken the covenant, but he's not going to use a whole lot of broken covenant language. He's not going to use a whole lot of legal language. He's going to actually use familial language. So one of the major unique aspects of Hosea as a prophet is that he doesn't dominantly use legal language to describe the broken Sinai covenant between Israel and Yahweh. Instead, Hosea dominantly uses two family institutional analogies to describe the broken relationship between Israel and Yahweh: marriage and sonship. That's what we want to talk about today, and then one other thing if we have time for it. So I want to talk about these two pictures. So I have affectionately referred to Hosea as the Dominic Toretto of Fast and the Furious amongst the prophets. So he's not like, it's all about family, right? Because he uses familial language, marriage and sonship. So Hosea's like, I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken because you broke in my family. It's kind of his portrayal of God. So it's like not an angry Dominic Toretto, a sad Dominic Toretto. And like Dominic Toretto, who does he get most angry at? When you mess with his family, and then he's going to come after you. And that's what God is actually described as in Hosea. You come after my family, you come after my son, Israel, that we talk about, you come after my bride, Israel, that we talk about, I'm going to come after you. So you don't mess with God's family. But God's family has broken the relationship throughout the book, and Hosea is trying to portray this picture. It's another reason why it seems Hosea is at the front of the prophets, because he uses this language familially amongst the 12. So it's obviously the marriage metaphor is encapsulated by Hosea and Gomer, which we will start talking about probably in 2 weeks. But the marriage metaphor between God and Israel that is in the book of Hosea stems out of ancient Near Eastern pictorial language of the gods and their polygamous relationships with all their consorts and wives. In particular, the big ones that you want to be aware of is because of the Baal worship that we talked about last week, and Baal being a major problem. Baal is the son of El, and these are the Phoenician gods from just to the north of Israel is Phoenicia. They're the ones who worship Baal, and Jeroboam I imports their worship somehow into the national, well, actually not Jeroboam. Jeroboam does the golden calves. It's Ahab and Jezebel who import Phoenician Baal worship as the state-sponsored religion of the Northern Kingdom. And that's what's been wrapped up here. So a lot of the imagery that you're going to get about Baal and El are going to affect how Hosea is using this pictorial language. El is the transcendent high god of the pantheon. Nobody sees El, nobody talks to El. El is Kronos and Zeus is Baal. You know, if you think of it in Greek terms like that. El is the wicked, not the wicked, the Wizard of Oz. Nobody sees Oz or anything. And Baal is kind of like how he presents himself. It's not the same God, but he lets Baal be his representative. So El had to impregnate 2 human women to beget the dusk and the dawn in their mythology. So you see in this that polygamous sexual relationships are how the gods have to work to create in this world. In the Baal cycle that actually focuses on Baal, he has at least 2 consorts. So he is the son of El, but he's not the only son of El, but he becomes El's human representative on earth. He's the high god of the pantheon, but El is above him amongst the pantheon's representatives, just as there are titans above Zeus. But Zeus, fighting the wars, becomes king of the gods and gets to create how he wants. So does Baal. He goes to war against Yam, the sea dragon. He goes and conquers Mot, the god of death. Yam is the Hebrew word for sea. Mot is the Hebrew word for death. So the Hebrew language is using the language of their neighbors to invent it. And they're coming out of religious stories, actually. So he has at least 2 consorts, Istate, also known as Ashtoreth, or Anat. And this is supposed to be a statue of Baal, and this is a colorized version of Istate. I'm gonna stick with that name because I'm more familiar with it. And supposedly every spring, when he meets and has sex with his consorts, it helps him actually grow the crops in the land, and then he sends the storms as the cloud rider and waters it and stuff. And so sexuality and the gods having sex was part of the creation cycle. And it would be the case not just for these, but for all ancient Mesopotamian religions. If you go down to Egypt, they have stuff about their gods meeting. The Philistines had their gods, the Mesopotamian Babylonians have theirs, and they all involve sex to somehow, not just to create new gods, but also to keep creation going. Rachel?
Was this sex consensual in these cycles?
Certainly amongst the Baal and his. I don't really know about El and the begetting of the dusk and the dawn. I would say most of the stories are consensual. Granted, in some of the stories, like the Greek gods, Zeus disguises himself and the woman...
A whole lot of rape and...
Yes. Yes. And so it did happen. I will say the creation things of heaven and earth, less so new people, new demigods and Nephilim and all that stuff. These aspects of the story do seem to be more consensual, as far as I'm aware. Which admittedly the El part, I'm more familiar with the Baal cycle stories for sure. The El parts I don't actually know, so I could be wrong on that. But I think these at least were consensual.
Was there any advantage to being the first of El's children, and was Baal the first? I mean, is there...
The first son of El?
Yes, the lineage, like it is important.
Was he an actual son? Or was
he
was a son.
He was an actual child of El, but I don't remember the Baal being the actual firstborn son in the sense that he was born first. Right. He becomes the firstborn son because that's the language of who's going to inherit. Okay. Baal, when Yam is taking over and El is wanting to give everything to Yam, so maybe Yam was the firstborn. Okay. All the other gods are saying, we don't want Yam, we want somebody else, and Baal's the only person who will go and fight Yam. So Baal says, if I fight him and I win, I'm the firstborn. I become your king. I become head of the pantheon. You do what I say. And they all agree to that. The Babylonian creation story, Enuma Elish, is a lot like it. Marduk says, I'll go fight the sea dragon Tiamat. Tiamat was like their mother, essentially, but she was a tyrannical mother trying to kill all the other gods because the gods killed their husband, her husband, their dad, the saltwater dragon, or the freshwater dragon. one of them's the saltwater, one's the freshwater. So it's the same story repeated and encapsulated in different ways. Read these stories about creation out of watery chaos and then read Genesis 1. It's God creating out of watery chaos. It's the same story, except he doesn't fight and he doesn't impregnate. And that's the point here. The sexual understanding of the God's rule of heaven and earth contrasts sharply with the Hebrew understanding of Yahweh, who does not act sexually to create. Instead, Yahweh's non-sexual yet no less deep affection for Israel is employed as polemic against the Canaanite nature religions represented by Baal worship and carried out through illicit sexual activities. So what does this mean? First off, what is polemic?
I don't know.
That's
What is it?
polemic is to say, I'm gonna use your story against you to undermine your truth claims. You told a story about fertility and crops growing, because this is where this is going, because Baal has sex with Istate and Anat. I am telling you the same story of God providing your crops and your food without having to have sex. And this is how the Old Testament portrays Yahweh in comparison to the other gods. To go back to the Baal thing, Baal is called the cloud rider when he defeats Yam. It is a title for saying you're victorious over chaos. You're victorious over Yam. You are the cloud rider. It's called victorious Baal, is what they call it now, that part of the story of the Baal cycle where he goes and kills Yam. And so the Old Testament portrays Yahweh as what? Cloud rider. Because they understand that picture, understand that imagery. To say, oh, Yahweh's the victorious God in heaven. It's not Baal. We owe allegiance to Yahweh, not Baal. So they take the picture of Baal and apply it to Yahweh in ways that are legitimate. Here, Hosea is wrapping up his imagery to do the same thing. Yahweh is the God who provides your crops, your food, not Baal. But he does it while loving you, Israel, without actually having to sexualize the relationship and stuff. And it helps them communicate, you guys have misapplied sexuality here. It doesn't work that way amongst Yahweh and his divine family and his pantheon, if you want to call it that, his divine council. He doesn't have sex with them to provide anything. He's beyond that. The transcendence of El El is a Hebrew word for God in the Old Testament. And so they're taking the name of the Phoenician high god El and giving it to Yahweh as a title. You are God. Baal, meaning Lord, is applied to God. He is Lord, but they have a different Hebrew word for that, so they don't typically call God Baal, but they could. But they paint their pictures in such a way as to take the stories that everybody was familiar with about a God and turn it into the true story about Yahweh. It's mythological, it's intentional, and it is polemical. It is designed to make an argument that says not Baal, Yahweh, not El, Yahweh, not sex without sex, and he's still going to accomplish it because he's better than these gods. That's the point. It's a comparison through storytelling. And the Bible does this everywhere. This is how the Exodus story is being told. In comparison to the gods, Yahweh marches in there, and I'll get to this, fights the Egyptian gods and then pulls his people out, no problem. Because he's better than these gods and stuff. And so that's the polemical idea. And Hosea is wrapping this up in marriage and in sonship. So Yahweh is committed to Israel with exclusivity. He's not going to just turn around and say, well, fine, Israel, I'll get rid of you and I'll start over with another Gentile nation, turning them into my people or something the way I did with Abraham. God's commitment to Israel in spite of her sins will never lead Yahweh to do that. We need to understand this about the Old Testament, but when we talk about the church being either the fulfillment or the replacement for Israel. Because I don't think the church can be a replacement for Israel. God has made certain that Israel is not to be replaced in the Old Testament. This is the story. But the story is supposed to be unfolding in the kinship language that Yahweh is a good husband to Israel. Despite how they have treated him, he is actually going to work to restore the estranged relationship between them. So it's a scandalous idea that Hosea is actually portraying here, because for God to decide certain things in this book is going to go against gender and honor codes of the ancient Near East, which is where we're going to turn and talk about here. His bride may be a whore out there as slutty and sexually active with every god that they possibly can find. And that's going to have consequences, but it's not going to lead Yahweh to throw them out entirely. So, in the ancient Near Eastern honor codes, honor shame culture here, a strong, honorable, deistic husband, so especially amongst the gods, but men did this as well, would be expected to severely punish or publicly throw out his wife due to the shame that she brings on him. So Yahweh isn't going to take this approach. He's going to do something different. Yes, he's going to punish her for her treatment of him, which is apostasy here. You guys are no longer faithful to Yahweh. That's the essence of apostasy. But I'm also going to, after I punish you, I'm not really going to throw you out. I'm going to woo you back into the desert. I'm going to call you back to me, and we're going to start this relationship over again. You've broken it. It's destroyed, but I can rebuild it, and I'm dedicated to you and doing that. But you guys have to understand the consequences of your actions. But it's not going to be the consequences everybody would expect in this culture. And that is scandalous. The God of Israel is not going to seek to save face by throwing Israel out for good. He's going to restore her to himself. And if I may point out the New Testament story of Joseph wanting to put Mary away quietly when she's found to be pregnant before they've actually gotten married. They're engaged, they're in their engagement state, and yet she's, 6 months pregnant at this point or something, maybe less than that. But they've definitely confirmed she's pregnant. And he's like, well, then I can't marry her. I need to, but I also don't want to see her die. That's the thing. Joseph is portrayed as someone who has all the rights to actually do this under Jewish law and Roman consent, to put his transgressing wife away and even kill her. And he says, I don't want that to happen. He's mimicking God and saying, I don't want the full consequences of your actions to come out there. I want you to live, but it can't be with me until God says, actually it can. She's not pregnant because of anything she's done except agree to being pregnant. And there, as I'm mentioning the other gods impregnating people, the story of the Holy Spirit overshadowing and the Virgin Mary actually being pregnant is supposed to be read actually in light of the divine gods of these pantheons needing to impregnate in order to renew creation. And here you actually see the story of God impregnating a woman with her consent and actually being the renewal of creation. But it's not, again, not with sexual means. It's actually beyond the sexual. That's a gift for humanity. God does not partake in it. So,
Is that why she went? I'm sorry.
Go.
Is that why she went to Elizabeth's?
well, I think in part she went to Elizabeth because the angel Gabriel told her Elizabeth was pregnant. She went to celebrate, to see for herself, to confirm it, because Elizabeth's pregnancy.
But the timing seems pretty.
Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant at the time, so maybe that's why I'm thinking Mary is 6 months pregnant when Joseph found out. It may not have been that long. It's a part of that was before Joseph found out, I think, and tried to put her away. She didn't go to Elizabeth because Joseph was trying to put her away.
No, I understand.
Right.
But the fact that she went, if he knew she was pregnant, would have been convenient and would be very much like God to say, let me help you, because it wouldn't be just Joseph. It would have been the whole community.
That is very true.
That
Yeah.
would be angry with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess
Yeah.
it's just a thought.
Rachel?
Well, and just to stratify the deification analogy, from my understanding, most mythologies have a lot of sex in them because they were trying to justify the actual actions happening in the communities. I'm getting raped because the god figure that I worship also goes and takes what he wants. So, maybe it's godlike. We're
So
going
maybe
to justify
that's a
what's happening that we can't control by making it into a religious factor in my life.
I think there's probably a lot of truth to that, and you have to take it case by case. But yes, a lot of that was probably justification after the fact, or men justifying their actions because they're acting like the gods and stuff, sure.
So to take that away stratifies God, Yahweh, even further away, because there is no example of that.
Good point.
In the Hebrew.
And so it would not justify a Hebrew man doing that, or any worshiper of Yahweh. A Gentile who's come to worship Yahweh, it's like, you can't justify that. God doesn't take those actions. Right. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
Which makes mythology seem more humanistic.
Well, it is.
In origin.
But
I agree. Be careful about that, because you're looking back on a demythologized rational culture and trying to read these people cultures. Those people themselves didn't think like that and stuff. So I think that's an aspect of it for sure, because it's being made up. But if you read the biblical stories about the gods that actually rebel against Yahweh, the celestial beings, the divine council members that leave, they're the ones fooling the nations and helping them come up with these stories and these lies. There are actual deistic background beings for this. That's where spiritual war comes from. And so it's not as simple. And most of the rational, demythologized thinking of modern times doesn't take that point that the Bible is making into account. In fact, most of them don't even know that is there. I didn't even know it was there until I got out of seminary. And somebody, I'm getting ready to come to Colorado. I'm living in Gonzales, Texas. I'm getting ready to drive up to their place in Westminster. And you guys were actually in KC the weekend that I did this, because I was at your parents' house for like 2 days before y'all show back up. And like a week before I'm getting ready to go, my friend messages me on Facebook, and he says, "Hey, have you read the Dr. Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm? If not, you should. It's a total paradigm shift." And he used that phrase. I said, "No, I don't even know who Dr. Heiser is." So I just immediately ordered the book. It came in the day before I left because I walked down my driveway. It was in the mailbox. I threw it in the car because I was leaving in the morning, and I went back inside and forgot all about it. The next day I woke up, I drove to Denver, Westminster area, and then I found the book. Said, well, I got like 2 days before you guys even get back, and my other friends are working during the day while I'm on vacation. I'm going to read this book, and it's like a 400-page book. I read 200 pages of it before y'all even got back, and that's where I learned it. And it's like, you don't even learn these things in seminary because seminaries, Bible colleges, to an extent, certain divinity schools, they descend from the college community, and the college community is the post-Enlightenment, rational, demythologized community. The ancients didn't have that. They thought in supernatural terms, and they believed in the supernatural, and so does the Bible. And it expressed things mythologically and supernaturally, for sure, but it also took it as a reality, and so does the Bible. Real supernatural beings that the ancients called gods, created by this one God, Yahweh, rebelled against him and tried to set up their own rival kingdoms. And it didn't just happen once in the garden with the serpent. It happened in Genesis 6, where the sons of God leave the heavenly realm to shack up with women. And then it happens again, over and over again, to some extent, possibly at Babel. And so it's a big ongoing problem. And the Messiah's spiritual warfare that we are caught up in and living in is about taking power away from those gods, giving it back to us to actually live righteous lives even now while they hold power, until he comes back, destroys them, and all the humans that are alongside them in their allegiance do things the way these gods want, because their allegiance to the god of power, sex, or money, or death and nihilism, all the things that still hold sway in our culture today that we're still fighting against and stuff, those gods have to go down. And the people that are allegiant to those gods are going to go down with those gods, which is why the gospel is about turning people away from that allegiance and saying there is another option. This God is better. It's the same polemic from beginning to end. It's the same polemic back then as it is now.
Which is why I say that as a counter to people accusing us of a man-made Yahweh.
Yeah, and that certainly comes up because they read things like, oh, the Jews were polytheistic and they had to figure out monotheism. Right. No, they were monotheistic from the time they met at Sinai, largely before that, in an unofficial capacity. They kept going back to what. But see, as we've talked about before, the polytheistic and the monotheistic mindset isn't really the best mindset for reading the Bible, because any non-physical being is referred to as a god, and so, in a real sense, even Christians that believe in angels and demons, non-physical beings, are polytheistic by ancient definition. And that's the definition we need to recover. Regardless, you don't try to access the heavenly realm, and you don't give allegiance to anything or anyone in the heavenly realm except for Yahweh. And surprisingly enough, he has exalted his son to be equal in status to him at his right hand, and he can also have that same level of allegiance to him, and you can access the divine realm through him. You don't go through dead humans, saints, you don't pray to dead people, and you don't go to angels because the demons will pick up on your prayers and they will offer themselves up as an answer. That's why you have an exclusive relationship with Yahweh, is because it is dangerous to seek after other beings, because other beings are out there and they will deceive you. This is why the law outlaws witchcraft and things like this. So let's summarize this much here about marriage from Huang. He says, the exclusivity of the covenantal relationship between Yahweh and Israel marks only the start of Hosea's depiction of the divergence between Yahwehism and Baalism. Hosea 2, that came out of nowhere. Hosea 2 goes on to upend the traditional dynamics of gender and honor in Mediterranean societies through Yahweh's stated intention to reclaim Israel as his bride. Even after punishing Israel for her apostasy, Yahweh insisted on wooing her again despite the cultural expectation for a cuckolded husband to banish a wayward wife who had caused him to lose face. Yahweh doesn't seek to save face, but rather to remarry Israel by leading her back to the wilderness in order to speak to her heart. Needless to say, the sort of divine commitment to a single human partner, and a wayward one at that, is unexpected in the ancient Near East context, where deities were often thought to keep multiple consorts for the utilitarian end of guaranteeing fertility of the land. So that's just the big summary statement of all that he's saying. God, you're not... It insults God, but God's honor is in no way diminished because his people are disloyal to him. He is in no way in need of reclaiming honor because his people have shamed him.
Because the rocks would cry out.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Creation itself glorifies God.
Right.
He doesn't lose a bit of it. It's in the people's best interest to give him the glory that is due his name. Because you become like the thing that you worship. That is an Old Testament principle repeated in the New Testament. And if you worship something dead like an idol that can't hear, that can't speak, that can't see, that can't do anything, you will lose your sight. You will lose your ability to see reality. You will lose your ability to understand and think because you're worshiping something that doesn't have a brain. And even though there's a corresponding reality out there that a deity is receiving your worship somewhere, that's a terrible deity. And you're becoming like that rebellious deity, rebelling against Yahweh, who created that deity and stuff. It's like, it tears creation apart. And the way you put creation back together again is you get the rebels, humans in creation, to start worshiping God again. And that's what God is committed to doing and seeing. He doesn't need to save face or cast us out. If we're truly cast out, it's not because God rejected us, it's because we rejected God. That's the apostasy. This generation that Hosea is dealing with may face the exile and face the consequences of it, but Israel can still come back to God in spite of exile. And that's what happens when you have a God who's like a good husband, devoted to his wife and only his wife and solely his wife. And it is a metaphor. It breaks down in the sense that he is going to go after the Gentiles as well, but he's not going to have a wife for every Gentile people. He has one human family, one wife, and you become incorporated, engrafted, as Paul says in Romans 9 and 10, you become grafted into the wife that's already there, the vine that's already there. You're not a replacement. He doesn't cut off one thing and then plant a new tree. He may cut off certain branches of it, but it's still the same tree. It's just other people have been grafted in. So that's the marriage metaphor. This second metaphor that he uses is sonship. It's the father-son relationship of the ancient Near East, but it's definitely recast. It's definitely inverted from the expectations of what a father-son relationship was supposed to be in the ancient world, because it's about Yahweh is actually concerned for Israel, his wayward son. So let's talk about the ancient culture here in like the last 10 minutes that we've got. In the ancient Near Eastern culture, the father-son relationship was not usually a loving father doting on his beloved son. That just wasn't really a thing. In fact, most sons of this day didn't really share any difference between any other member of the household, not even the servants and the slaves. Except for the fact that one day the dad was going to die and leave the son to inherit, there wasn't that much benefit to being son of the patriarchal father. It wasn't a blessed father-son relationship in there. It was something different. A lot of the language for Hosea and the language of father-son relationships is employed in covenants throughout the ancient Near East. So the relationship of father and son, that language is used to employ the greater and the lesser, or suzerain vassal treaties, covenants of the ancient world. The participants were usually unequal. There were treaties amongst equals, like one king equal to another king, but for the most part, they're suzerain vassal treaties. They're greaters, suzerains, vassals, the lesser. And this culturally established picture turns the personal level of father-son relationships into this covenant relationship here on a political level. The suzerain is the greater, and he makes the treaty with his vassal, the lesser. So the father-son relationship of the ancient world was mostly just one person stepping on another until he was too weak to step on him, and then the son turns around and kicks the father to the curb. So the father-son relationship language is not used to employ affection between two parties. In ancient Near Eastern treaties, it's hierarchical expectations of respect and obedience. It kept things ordered, it kept things in line, but it had nothing to do with actual affection, for the most part. I'm not saying it didn't happen, didn't exist, but that would have been very much an exception to the rule. Examples that you can find if you look them up, if you look up the letters at Mari, King Zimralim at Mari calls Abel-P-El of Ashuna, king of Ashuna, my father. It's a letter that's describing a previous treaty, covenant made between them, where Abel-P-El is the suzerain to his vassal, King Zimralim. So he describes it as the suzerain is my father. He is the son. Egyptian pharaohs referred to as fathers of their sons throughout all sorts of Canaanite treaties that Egypt had when it ruled Canaan. For instance, Rib-Haddah refers to Pharaoh as his father. He's a Canaanite king, and in the treaties, the father-son language is used to employ the fact that I'm submissive to you, or if you're the Egyptian Pharaoh, I'm your father, you're my son, meaning you're submissive to me. The ultimate expression of this is Jesus, the Son of God, saying, I don't do what I want. I do what my Father wants. I see him doing something, I get in line and I do it. And it's not an evil thing to have order and to have hierarchy. This just does it without affection, without love being at the core of it. And that's what honor-shame cultures get wrong. They're not bad. You do want to have honor and you do want to avoid shame, but you got to have love and affection for the people around you at the core of it to motivate the honor and avoid the shame. That's not really what goes on here. These treaties were made because the pharaohs conquered the Canaanite kings. And so they're saying, I will adopt you as my son. You will be my vassal. I will rule your territory. You will do what I say, but I'm your father, and that's how things are going to be from now on. During the time of the writing prophets, just to get back to Hosea in particular, the Assyrian Empire took this covenant treaty idea to a whole nother level because they adopt some Pharaoh-like qualities before them so that only the Assyrian king could claim to be the son of the gods. So his father is the gods, he's the son, so he respects his father, the gods, does what is right, but then everybody else below him that he conquers, he's a father to them, and he demands unconditional obedience and respect from that people throughout the world that he will refer to in treaties as his sons. Assyria comes down and they conquer the Hittite Empire and the Phoenicians. All of a sudden, Tiglath-Pileser III is father to the Hittite king, his son, to the Phoenician people, his sons. That's the language of the covenant, and Hosea is going to employ that to do something here. Actual familial devotion, if you're reading these as a modern reader, and you think, oh, he's calling them the son, oh, he must love these people that he conquered, it must not be so bad. Wrong. It was bad, they didn't care. As long as you were obedient in line, their affection was to give you a title you may be able to withhold your title as king of the people or something, so long as you were submissive to them as the emperor and the king and stuff. But they didn't actually care about you. They'd kill you and toss you out in a moment you get out of line. So, the father of the empire, the king of Syria, was a warlord and brutally terrorized his sons if they got even slightly out of line. For instance, refusing to pay tribute, which is how Israel leads the final rebellion that causes, in 722, Assyria to come down and attack them and wipe them out. So, or at least disperse them throughout the land. So by claiming a special divine status for themselves, the pharaohs, and later the Assyrian kings, they built power structures that demanded their privileges be met by everybody without a responsibility for anyone of them to reciprocate any affection or any care or concern for anybody underneath them. So it places the burden on everybody else without a responsibility for providing good. This father-son language was, at the political level, the norm. But it was also the norm, it becomes the norm at the covenantal language because it was the norm at the personal level. Already. Before the pharaohs, before the Assyrian Empire gained strength in Hosea's time and stuff, this was already norm. The father-son relationship, which the ancient Near Eastern Hebrew would have grown up with, was little more than a transactional relationship in which the son was expected to show obedience and respect to the father without necessarily receiving affection and personal connection in return. Yes, it was. That is a...
That's what it sounded.
Yes, and it certainly very easily devolves into tyranny.
Right.
And in fact, if you look up honor-shame cultures that still exist today, for instance, like Japan last century, you will still see a lot of this. If you kind of watch some of Jackie Chan's movies from like the 80s and 90s, where especially like if you ever watch Drunken Master, Legend of the Drunken Master, the sequel. The first one is just a big comedy, but the sequel actually had a serious story behind it. But because he's a drunken fool, Jackie Chan's son character, his dad says, "I disown you and I cast you out," because the drunken fool of the son has brought such shame on him. And that was in like 1994 or something when that movie came out. And it was still the norm in the Chinese cultures and stuff, and you can find it in a lot of honor shame cultures that still exist today. You see how easily it devolves into tyranny, control, power dynamics, which is why I use this imagery up here. You are nothing more than the person in society greater than you's stepping stone. So the empire steps on the king steps on his people, and the father amongst the people steps on his son, and the son steps on whoever he can until you try to move up.
We call that generational trauma.
You're not wrong. So into this hierarchical, transactional, distant, and affectionless world of father-son relationships comes Hosea, describing the Yahweh-Israel relationship as that of a father who genuinely loves his son, affectionately doting on him, providing for all of his needs, only to have the son turn around and disrespect and reject the father at every single turn. From both directions, this was a scandalous idea for the readers and hearers of Hosea. One, the son is not supposed to act that way to the father. Two, why would the father do that? The father should just be seeking the honor that he deserves, given by the son. Why does he care what the son thinks? And Hosea says, because that's actually how the relationship works best. That's actually the massive secret to the Bible for all cultures polemically to fight against. It's not power that you need. It's love is the motivating rule, and whatever hierarchical structures you have, and there will always be some to any degree, the law is supposed to be love, not dominance and power. Quick question. But
How does this break down when it comes to the nature versus nurture argument? Because as parents, you have a natural amount of affection for your child, but we're not describing that in this society. is that because it was just not acceptable to be open about that? Or was there really just like a much less strong biological?
I would say, no, I don't know that it has anything to do with biology. Keep in mind, one, you in the ancient world, you lived for having kids, for having a big family, but it was also a utilitarian means to keeping your culture, your society, and because most everybody was a farmer, your farm running. You didn't have, yeah, so kids were viewed as a necessary means to an end. That's the predominant idea. It's not that affection didn't exist. It's that, because you might have 10 or 12 kids. Up to a century ago, that was still culturally the norm for the most part. Larger families. It's only in recent families that 2.5 kids has become the average, and now our population rate is in trouble, right? And so the norm was different, and they had to address it differently. You had to keep order and life going was more important than affection in the order and the life. So they put the emphasis on let's be orderly, let's be more so than affectionate. As long as the order was going, the affection didn't matter. And if you're a kid, you don't necessarily grow up hearing that you're supposed to be in an affectionate relationship with your parents. You've got
nature versus nurture.
So it might be.
You don't expect that. And you don't feel like it's missing.
Yes, I would say you can never get away from it completely. I mean, but it causes a lot of problems in Jacob's family when he's got 12 sons and he focuses only on Joseph. And later, when he thinks Joseph is dead, when he focuses only on Dan. Is Dan? Dan, I think. The youngest son of Rachel, because he loved Rachel more, and it caused all sorts of familial problems, right? So let me summarize here in the last few. Let me do 2 more things that I want to summarize here, and we'll pick it up starting here next week. 2 things I want you to note about the sonship language as it applies to Israel. Firstly, Hosea is redefining sonship, including the entire people of Israel, not merely the king, like the pharaohs or the Assyrian kings. In Hosea 11, he says, "When out of Israel, Israel was a child, I loved him. Out of Egypt, I called my son." All Israel is communally included. It is not. You're not excluded because you're not royalty or anything. Everybody who's an Israelite can be included in being the son of God collectively. Hosea is deliberately inverting the socio-political language of his time. He's using the socio-political and familial language of his time as a polemic against his society, against the politics of his time, and saying there is another way, there is a better way. And it's language that primarily comes from Egypt and Assyria that has been perverted, that he wants to do something about, that Yahweh wants to do something about. Secondly, note that Hosea does not depict Yahweh as an angry father chasing after his wayward son. He doesn't look to get after him and punish him and shame him. Instead, to the surprise of everyone, Yahweh is a tender and loving father who seeks to restore the good of the disobedient and wayward son. By restoring the relationship, the son broke with his father. The father has been nothing but affectionate and saying, "I'm totally willing to be there for you, son." And the son says, "Piss off, Dad." And that's the idea that Hosea is living and writing with, which is why he says later on in Hosea 11, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? How can I treat you like Admah? How can I make you like Zeboim? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused. I won't carry out my fierce anger. I won't devastate Ephraim again. For I am God and not a man, the Holy One among you. I will not come against their cities. I will not totally and completely obliterate and destroy you." That's the idea. So he's emotionally torn here. He's holy and he has to do something. But Hosea's portrayal of Yahweh is that he's a good father and he's deeply troubled by the idea of actually judging Israel. So what he longs for is to save the wayward boy, not to destroy him in anger and move on. Any more than he wants to divorce his wife in that picture. So both of these images of marriage and sonship are fundamentally doing the same thing. Portraying God as good and all the people as bad, and him just constantly calling out saying, it doesn't have to go this way. There is another path. But the people don't want to take that path. So God says, I'll let the consequences fall on you, but even then, I'm still going to seek you out. I'm still going to try and at least get your children to follow after me. So I'm going to give you children, despite the fact that you don't deserve them. And it's just wildly surprising because nobody would expect a God to even care, let alone to care this much.